Welcome back to the Malaysia Money Matters show. It's December 10th, 2024. And we've got a lot to get through today, so much happening in the markets here. But we've also got some big global events that could really impact us here. Let's get right into it with some Malaysian company news. What do you say?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so Tenaga National BHD, TNB, just signed a deal. They're going to be supplying renewable energy to Singapore, 50 megawatts worth.
Yeah, this is big. It's actually the first agreement like this between Malaysia and Singapore.
Wow, a real first. So this is part of a larger plan to export 300 megawatts.
Yeah.
What's the impact of something like this?
Well, for Singapore, it means cleaner energy. But for Malaysia, this could mean a lot more investment in renewables, like solar and wind power. And it could really help make our electricity grid stronger, too.
That's great. Now let's move on to Axiata Group. There's a lot of talk about them merging with PT, Smartfren Telecom, their Indonesian telecom arm, that is.
Yeah, if this happens, it would create a huge telecom company, something like 100 million customers.
Wow. So this would be another telecom merger in Indonesia. We've seen a few of these lately, haven't we?
We have. It's a trend. Companies are joining together to stay competitive.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, now moving on to something a little different. TMC Life Sciences just removed their CEO, Wan Nadayawan Mode Abdullah Yaqub. It came after an internal inquiry.
Right. They found her responsible for some bad contract decisions.
She's denied the allegations. But ultimately, the shareholders made the decision to remove her.
That's right.
Okay, let's shift gears now and talk about Gagasan Nadi Surgas. They're doing a lot of work in the affordable housing sector. In fact, they just signed a deal to build over RM1 billion worth of homes in the Kuasa Damansara township.
They're really trying to help address the need for affordable housing. This is actually their second project with Kwasa Land.
That's a great initiative. Now, for something completely different, Con Food, you know, the frozen food company, they're venturing into IT equipment distribution.
Yeah, that was a surprise. It seems like they're really looking to branch out, maybe find some new sources of revenue.
It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Now, GFM Services, they're a facilities management company, and they're looking at acquiring a stake in Shapadu Energy, 45% to be exact.
If they manage to pull this off, it could really boost their presence in the oil and gas industry. Shapadu has a very important contract at the Penrang refinery and petrochemical complex.
So a strategic move for sure. Now let's talk about IPOs. Vanzo Holdings just had their IPO, and it was oversubscribed by a huge margin, 66.71 times, in fact.
That's a lot. It shows a lot of investor confidence in the company. They're using the capital to expand, and investors see potential there.
That's great. And another IPO that we should mention is Swift Energy Technology. They're aiming to raise over RM 84 million to help with their expansion. They've got a good track record in industrial automation.
They seem to be positioning themselves for a lot of growth. The market is very interested in companies like this.
Now let's step back and take a look at the bigger picture. What are some global events that might have an impact on the Malaysian market?
Well, China is making a big change in its economic strategy.
So you're loosening monetary policy
Right.
and increasing fiscal spending, right?
Right. Essentially, they're putting more money into the economy. It's the first big shift like this since 2011. They're getting ready for some challenges.
Like what kind of challenges?
Well, there's a possibility of a trade war with the U.S.
Under President Trump.
Exactly.
That would definitely be a big challenge. So what would that mean for Malaysian companies?
Any company doing business with China should pay close attention. The outcome of a trade war like that could impact their operations significantly.
Right. So even things happening on the other side of the world can impact us here. Now, another global event we need to talk about, Bitcoin. The U.S. Bitcoin market has been very active since the election.
Investors are putting billions into Bitcoin ETFs. They're expecting a crypto boom under the new president.
Interesting. Because President Trump has always been supportive of crypto, hasn't he?
He has, and he's appointed people who share his views.
So this could mean some big changes in U.S. regulations.
And that could have a ripple effect on the global crypto market.
Including Malaysia.
Including Malaysia.
So much to discuss, and this is only the beginning. We'll be back soon with more Malaysian company news and global updates. Stay tuned.
It's definitely keeping everyone on their toes, that's for sure.
It really is. So much going on. Speaking of keeping things interesting, let's stay in the political realm for a moment. There's been some news here in Malaysia. Lim Guan Eng, the DAP chairman, has filed a bankruptcy notice against former Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin.
Oh, wow. This is related to that court case where Muhyiddin had to pay Lim over RM 1.3 million for defamation.
Right. So Muhidden's lawyers are trying to pause the bankruptcy proceedings. They're proposing a partial payment instead.
It just adds another layer to an already complex political situation.
For sure. Now, across the globe, former U.S. President Donald Trump is claiming he's been in talks with China's Xi Jinping.
Hmm, interesting. Especially after all the tension we've seen between those two countries.
And all the trade disagreements?
If these talks are actually happening, it could be a sign that things are changing.
Which would have implications for everyone,
Absolutely.
especially with all the talk about Trump potentially bringing in new tariffs.
And trade barriers.
Investors are definitely going to be watching this very closely.
It could have a big impact on global trade.
And on how well economies around the world are performing.
Exactly.
Now, shifting gears completely, there's been a major development in the Middle East. The Syrian president, Bashar al-Assad, has apparently fled to Russia after rebels took control of Damascus.
Wow, that's a huge change. After all these years,
It marks the end of his family's rule.
it does, and it's a big turning point in the Syrian civil war, which, let's not forget, has been going on for over a decade.
Right. So now the rebels have to figure out how to rebuild the country.
While the rest of the world tries to understand what this shift in power really means.
It's a situation with a lot of unknowns, both for Syria and the entire region.
Definitely.
Okay, let's bring it back to the corporate world for a bit. What's going on with UEM Sunrise?
Well, they've gotten approval for a new project in Melbourne, Australia.
Oh, interesting.
They're going to be building homes specifically for renting.
So they're looking to diversify.
Exactly. And they're tapping into that growing demand for rentals in Australia.
Makes sense. And speaking of opportunities closer to home, there's been talk about a potential special financial zone between Johor and Singapore.
Yeah, that's the Johor Singapore Special Financial Zone. If this actually happens, it could really change things for the property market in Iskandar, Malaysia.
Which is right across the border from Singapore.
Exactly. It's all about attracting investment and boosting economic activity.
And UEM Sunrise could benefit from this, right?
Potentially, yes. They have a lot of land in Iskandar, Malaysia.
So they're well positioned.
They are, but we'll have to wait and see what the specific incentives and regulations look like to really understand the full impact.
Makes sense. Now, some good news for shareholders of Hartalega Holdings. They just announced a special dividend.
That's a nice surprise, especially after the tough times the glove industry has been through.
It shows that they're confident about their financial performance.
And they want to reward their investors.
It could also be a sign that they believe the worst is over for the glove industry.
That's possible.
Now, Managed Bay Systems, they're planning to raise funds through a rights issue.
Right. They're going to use the funds for their current projects and for some new ventures in fintech.
So financial technology.
Right.
They're trying to capitalize on that growing demand for digital financial solutions.
It seems like they've got some projects in the works, like a peer-to-peer financing platform and a super app for financial services. They're also collaborating with some big names like MasterCard and our national railway company.
Some pretty bold moves.
They are.
Okay, moving on. The Construction Industry Development Board, or CIDB, has a new CEO,
Oh, who is it?
Zenora Zainal.
She's been with the CIDB for a long time.
She has, and she's got a lot of experience. Hopefully she can lead the organization through a period of growth and innovation.
I hope so too.
Now for some economic updates. Japan's economy has grown more than expected in the third quarter.
That's good news for the global economy. Japan is a major player.
There are still some concerns about how sustainable this recovery is, though, especially since consumer spending has been revised downwards.
The Bank of Japan has a tough decision to make about interest rates.
They have to balance those positive growth figures against the concerns about consumer spending.
And potential inflation.
Right. Here in Malaysia, retail sales grew faster in the third quarter.
That's a good sign for our economy. People are feeling more confident about spending money.
That's encouraging. And the unemployment rate remained steady in October.
So the job market seems relatively healthy.
That's good.
But there could be challenges ahead.
Like what?
Well, the government's plan to adjust subsidies for certain types of petrol, and the possibility of higher taxes on sugary drinks, those could affect how much people spend.
And potentially lead to higher prices.
It's a balancing act for the government.
They're trying to keep the economy growing, but they also have to manage inflation.
And make sure things still affordable for people.
It's a tough job. Speaking of economic challenges, there's been some discussion about data quality in the UK.
Oh, right. There are concerns about how accurate and reliable the data is. The data that's coming from the Office for National Statistics and the Bank of England.
And why is that a problem?
Well, you need good data to make good policy decisions. If the data is flawed, it could lead to policies that actually harm the economy.
So it's a reminder that even in developed countries, data quality can be an issue.
It is, and it highlights how important it is to have strong methods for collecting and analyzing data.
Right. Now, back in Malaysia, there's an update on the 1MDB Tenere trial. Former Prime Minister Najib Razak is claiming that there was a plot by the U.S. to prevent him from getting evidence for his defense.
He's alleging that the U.S. Department of Justice blocked his attempts to get documents. Documents that he believes would prove he's innocent?
It's a complicated legal battle.
With some political undertones?
It's definitely going to continue to attract attention.
I think so.
He also denied having any personal stake in speeding up a government-backed loan for a joint venture between 1MBB and ADAR Investments.
What's he saying?
He's saying he was just following a request to expedite the process.
Okay.
This is all part of his defense strategy, of course. He's facing charges of abuse of power and money laundering.
Right, related to the 1MDB scandal.
It's up to the court to decide if his claims are valid.
And to ultimately determine his guilt or innocence.
Okay, on another legal matter. Mukhriz Mahathir, the son of former Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad, has given testimony in court. It's regarding a defamation suit his father filed against Deputy Prime Minister Ahmad Zahid Hamidi.
Oh, right. This is about that statement Zahid made, alleging that Mahathir's real name is Mahathir al-Iskandar Kuti.
Exactly. Mukhriz's testimony was focused on his family history.
And whether or not Zahid's statement was accurate.
Another example of the complex legal and political landscape here in Malaysia. Now, over in the tech sector, Jack Ma has made a rare public appearance.
Okay.
He's a co-founder of Alibaba and Ant Group.
Right.
He gave a speech at Ant Group's 20th anniversary celebration.
Oh, that's interesting.
This is significant because he's been keeping a low profile ever since the Chinese government cracked down on Ant Group and stopped its planned IPO.
Right.
In his speech, he talked about the opportunities that come with artificial intelligence, and he urged the company to embrace those advancements.
That's interesting.
Meanwhile, Ant Group is facing another challenge. China has launched an investigation into NVIDIA.
NVIDIA.
They're a major supplier of chips used for artificial intelligence.
A lot of people see this as a response to the U.S. restricting chip exports to China.
It definitely shows the growing tension between the two countries in the tech sector.
This tension is likely to continue. Both countries want to be the leader in technology.
And they want to dominate those key industries.
Exactly.
Now, shifting our focus to India, the Adani Group has announced a massive investment plan.
Oh, massive.
Over U.S. $88 billion. They're planning to invest this in the state of Rajasthan.
What are they focusing on?
Renewable energy, cement production, and logistics.
This is a big development, especially considering the recent U.S. indictment of Gautam Adani. He's the founder of the Adani Group.
Right.
Despite those legal issues, the group seems determined to keep investing.
And they want to remain a major player in the Indian economy.
That makes sense.
And there's more news from India. They've appointed a new head for the Reserve Bank of India.
Oh, who is it?
Sanjay Malhotra.
I don't know that name.
He's a career bureaucrat, very experienced in public policy.
Okay.
He's got a tough job ahead of him. He needs to guide the Indian economy through a period of slower growth and rising inflation.
It'll be interesting to see what he does.
Now, over in Europe, French President Emmanuel Macron is under pressure. He needs to appoint a new prime minister.
Why? What happened?
The previous government was ousted.
Oh, wow.
The political situation in France is pretty unstable right now.
It sounds like it.
Macron needs to find a new leader who can stabilize things.
And tackle all the challenges facing the country.
Exactly. And in the world of finance, the CEO of UBS Group has issued a warning. He's concerned about potential market volatility in the coming year.
Why is that?
He's pointing to geopolitical events as a risk factor.
Like what?
Well, potential trade wars
Okay.
and protectionist policies.
It's a reminder that everything is connected.
What happens in one part of the world can impact the global economy.
It's definitely a time for investors to be cautious
And to think carefully about the risks.
before making any investment decisions.
Right. Before we move on, I wanted to circle back to something we talked about earlier. U.S. Bitcoin ETFs have been seeing a lot of inflows since the election.
Right.
This is likely due to expectations of a more favorable regulatory environment for crypto.
Under the new administration.
It shows that investor interest in crypto is still strong.
Even with all the ups and downs we've seen lately,
The crypto market is constantly changing.
it's definitely fascinating to watch.
Okay, it's time to recap some of the biggest news stories we've discussed today.
Let's do it.
You know, we've talked about a lot of big news stories today. But sometimes it's the smaller details that are really interesting. Like, for example, there have been some updates on shipping rates from the Baltic Exchange.
Yeah, these might seem like small things, but they can actually tell us a lot about global trade, and they can hint at larger economic trends.
So, for example, rates for those big ships that carry iron ore and coal, those have been going down. Could that mean demand for these raw materials is slowing?
It's possible, and that could be a problem for countries that depend on exporting those materials.
Right. On the other hand, rates for ships that carry grain and other agricultural products, those have been doing better. Does that mean there's a higher demand for food?
It could, or it could just be a shift in global trade patterns.
By looking at these trends, we can get a sense of how different industries are performing. It's all connected. Speaking of things that can impact the economy, we can't forget about the weather. Malaysia has issued some severe rain warnings for a few states.
Yeah, that kind of weather can cause disruptions to things like oil and gas production and transportation.
It's a reminder that natural disasters can have a real impact on businesses.
And on the economy as a whole.
Investors need to be aware of these kinds of risks and think about how they might affect their investments.
Definitely.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into the day's news, it's pretty amazing how much we've covered.
It is.
It really shows how complex and interconnected the global financial markets are, from mergers and acquisitions to political controversies to shifts in economic policy. There's always something happening that can impact our
You
investments.
have to keep track of.
It is. But that's why we do this show. We want to help our listeners make sense of it all and make informed decisions.
So if you're looking for reliable financial news and analysis, be sure to subscribe to the Malaysia Money Matters podcast. We'll be back soon with more discussions to help you navigate the complexities of the financial world. Until then, stay curious and stay invested.
Hey there, thanks for tuning in. If you would like a deeper dive into all the investment opportunities from today's news, subscribe to my newsletter at moneymatters.substack.com. I will be sharing a deeper analysis of the key investment opportunities from today's news, including what makes these opportunities stand out and how they fit into the broader market trends. By subscribing to the Malaysia Money Matters newsletter, you will also get exclusive insights on my watch list and portfolio and fundamental reports on Malaysian listed companies.